So we have two. Zach, is your Zachary the same? Because you normally go, you have an H. You have an H, you just abbreviate to so yes, Afri at the end here. Zachary Belford, Zachary Mitton.
I'll be Zach.
So Zach and Zachary for the ease of this.
Bob.
And then we have Shane and Wei Tang and the co-ops that with the dynamic duo of the co-op. So myself and Yaz are the co-op, and off we go.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is actually the cooler panel, the platform panel. I'm Yaz, Director of DevRel for the ETC Co-op, and I want to give everybody here the opportunity to give me like a brief intro. We'll start with Wei.
I'm Wei Tang, and I'm a co-developer at Party Technology, and I'm with the current maintainer for Multicast project. So that's me.
I'm Shane Jonas. I work at ETC Labs. Been in the space for a while, and I work on projects like OpenRPC, Jade, and Pristine.
Zac Mitton, worked at Consensus for a little bit, worked with ETC Labs a little bit, worked on TrueBit, libertarian, hardcore immutabilist.
I'm Zachary Belford. I've worked at a bunch of software startups in Vancouver especially. That's mostly what I've been focused on in my professional career up until I guess maybe 3-4 years ago. Started getting into crypto, and I work with Shane and a few other co-workers that are here with us today at ETC Labs Core, and we work on the tooling team, as Shane mentioned.
I'm Afri. I'm coming from the Ethereum community. I used to maintain a Parity Ethereum client. I'm still with Parity Technologies. For a very brief amount of time, I was hard fork coordinator for Ethereum. Now I'm doing this for Ethereum Classic, and yeah, let's get this panel started.
Awesome. All right, we're going to start off by talking about clients. This week we had a lot of conversation about clients, Besu, Mantis. Zach, you said interesting things about like the clients, like having lesser clients for the network is actually better for stability. You want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I guess my opinion is kind of the minority opinion usually around here, but yeah, obviously Ethereum was one of the first ones to kind of just do 3 separate clients. But actually, if you go back to like Satoshi, he had said that if more than one client existed for Bitcoin, he thought it would be like a menace to the network. And just to describe the reasoning I have for this opinion, I'm assuming it's, you know, it's kind of just universal stuff. Is basically if you have more than one client, then they have to all be working correctly in order for you to have a smooth network. If one of them isn't working correctly, and that happens to be the one that you're using for your source of truth, then you can be attacked quite easily. So I think exchanges basically need to run all of the clients that could be interpreted as you know, the real ones, and they probably have to run custom software to monitor the health between them.
Can I comment on that? Yeah, so what if you only have one client and this is not working correctly? So you have basically 2 downsides of not having multiple clients. So one is that I believe having multiple clients forces you to have higher quality client. You have like, you need to do like this cross-client consensus testing. You need to be like very careful correctly implementing the spec. And the second upside is that you don't have a single entity, let it be a developer or a team of developers or a company, able to just change the consensus rules because they control the code, by so de facto controlling the protocol. But if you have multiple clients, you have to talk to all the teams in the space. So it makes sense not to have only one client. But I also agree with this notion that we shouldn't have too many clients. So there's like the sweet spot somewhere in the middle.
I also think the issue of the consensus split that you just mentioned can actually be prevented on the Ethereum and Ethereum Classic network. It is just that our software architecture currently isn't there. So the thing we can do is just to separate the networking and the actual consensus and runtime execution layer. And when a miner mines a block, it always use like multiple the execution engine to try to execute the block until it finds a block that all the execution engines agrees. That should always be the case, but if there's a like implementation difference, then the miner can still find a block that all the execution engine agrees. And the same for block coming from the network, that we only accept blocks that all execution engines agrees on. And I think if we can get an architecture like that, it would be like quite robust in case of preventing the consensus split issue and also have the benefits for multiple clients.
So if I may, is that, so maybe not all of you know, Wei, you are one of, or did you start Sputnik VM? Like you worked on Sputnik VM quite a bit though, either way, right?
He built it.
Yeah, okay. So like, I'm wondering, is that sort of what the motivation there for having a pluggable and multiple EVMs is to like start to create, say, more than one engine of execution, as you've put it, that you could run something in to make sure that it's working?
Yeah, I think that was one of the motivation, but another important motivation for Sputnik VM is that at that time we don't really have a EVM that primarily designed for Ethereum Classic, so we decided to create one.
I see.
And I think like there should be like a sweet spot between having one client where even if it's so popular, some danger in it might affect the whole network, and having too many clients, like 9 clients in ETH 2.0, might become like harder for coordination and stuff. So in ETC, we have parity, we have multi-get, classic get. I think, what about Besu and Mantis? What are your thoughts on it? If they can be fully supported in ETC, any thoughts on those kind of clients?
I definitely like that there'll be new entrants into the client space on ETC, and it's great to see like a Hyperledger project be behind it. And yeah, like Mantis would be great too. It'd be great to get support again for that.
I think Mantis had a fair chance, and Charles already said that they effectively decided half a year ago to no longer maintain it. And I mean, if he comes up today on stage and announces otherwise, it would be nice, and I guess we would appreciate this as a community. But I also believe if they are not 100% committed to do it, then they shouldn't bother, really, and we shouldn't bother.
I just want to say I disagree that having too many clients is a bad thing. The thing is the actual reason that I think currently having too many clients is a bad thing is we need to do hard fork coordination. That is a thing that I think we can abandon. Because in the future, I think we can use a lot more automated process, for example, signaling or voting or any stuff like that to do hard fork, and I think that will be quite more robust. And in that case, we can just imagine the situation where just one client rolls out a future upgrade, and then other client might follow up, and then miners can already start to signaling that they want to support this hard fork. And once just enough of the clients did the release and miners start to signaling, the hard fork is automatically logged in. So in that case, there's no coordination required, and it's actually, I think in that case, it's just the more clients we have, the better.
Okay.
And you have an EIP or ECIP around that, right?
We have an ECIP around signaling, and
yeah, right.
I have a private specification around all the ideas, the whole package of this, but I haven't published that yet.
Isn't that a problem that we just shift governance from the community or the core developers towards the miners?
I don't think so, because it's still, ultimately the decision is on like each individual users whether they want to actually follow the hard fork. So it's ultimately still a community issue, but it's just the miners, they signal it, so we have it's maybe not miners, maybe coin owners, but we can ultimately decide on a solution like using whatever. But what I'm arguing is that an automated solution is better than anything require human coordination.
I agree with this, yes. And I'm a big fan of signaling. Yeah, we should explore that.
I would argue that the only way you get an upgrade done is if the miners will upgrade it, right? Because they're the ones ultimately producing the blocks. So if they don't upgrade, nor does your network. So they are the ones that really decide. You can make an update.
Yeah, I mean, but they also like incentivized, and as Aiden said, they are opportunistic, so they go where the money is. And if they see that core developers are working in this direction, they will not just go and walk into the other direction.
Yeah, that's actually good. Like, that's super different, right, than your fair point.
All right, let's go to Atlantis for a second. Afri, you came from ETH as a hard fork coordinator, and you were the hard fork coordinator for Atlantis. Is there anything what are the biggest challenges that you saw in Atlantis coming to the ETC community?
Technical or in general?
Like anything, like, I mean, social,
yeah.
technical.
The biggest challenge in Ethereum Classic is helping people to talk to each other, yeah. in a way that there's eventually a result at the end of the day.
Yeah,
that was quite interesting. Yeah.
Do you find it a little bit more political than Ethereum, or like?
Yeah, much more. It's much smaller and much more interesting.
Awesome. Wei, and like continuing about Atlantis, you were the first one to whistleblow when the original block date was, I believe it was 8.5, or I mean, like, it was really early, within a month time frame. Can you tell us more about why we should, like, as a network, maybe we should, like, we have to focus more on security and more testing and stuff, and why is that important?
I mean, because currently any consensus split, like any bug we write in the code is fatal. So if there's ever a consensus split among multiple clients, or if there, like in that case, we can bring the whole network down for like at least a day, or even if the software release schedule is longer, then it can be even weeks. And that would be really huge financial loss compared with what we gain from those feature upgrades in those hard forks. So that's why I think focusing on like security and safety is quite important. And I think there are no reason of why we postponed the hard fork is because we actually found a bug in Classic Gas. So it's kind of just not safe to do at that time.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the ethos of like that Anthony was talking about, move slow and don't break things.
Yeah, like what good does it matter if we add features quickly in this case? Because if it doesn't work, it's pretty much party's over, right? Yeah. Like there's not really any wiggle room for mistakes without losing a lot of credibility anyways, right? Yeah, so. All
right, Zach and Shane, let's talk about like the tooling you guys were built for UTC and EVM, like OpenRPC. We have Jade. How are tools gonna how do those tools why are they important for developers to enable them to build on UTC and stuff?
So yeah, a lot of the tooling Zach and I are working on is trying to open up the developer community. So the big project that's going to help there is OpenRPC, which is like a Swagger alternative for JSON RPC, and that lets us open up stuff, like generate stuff like Web3, which we have already for JavaScript, but for multiple languages like Rust, Golang, all this stuff, so that you can just not only interact with smart contract and the chain in the browser, but in your particular language of choice. And I think in the ETH community, all of the libraries for these things are maintained by 10 different teams probably.
Hands.
Whereas we're just and I feel like that's a lot of developer time just wasted. And
that was us, right?
We've wasted many a times maintaining a Web3 Web3.js libraries. So, yeah.
You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it was like a very simple example is the different touching points that you would need to go and update something if you were to change something to do with the JSON RPC interface, which is the interface that most developers would use. So like if you're using like Web3.js, Web3.js is going to make a bunch of JSON RPC calls for you, right? So like if we start from the bottom, the person making the client would say capitalize a letter, right? It's like, yeah, it makes more sense capitalize. Everything else is capitalized. This one should be capitalized. Let's capitalize it. So you could make that change there, and then you'd go to like the README for the client and change the docs there, and then maybe there's a wiki, so you go change it there. And then maybe there's like a deployed documentation site, so you go into Discord and you're like, who owns this site? And then, then you get to the people who are building tools, and you're like, okay, let's go to Web3.js and capitalize it there, and then let's go to, like, you see what I'm saying? It goes on forever, and what ends up happening is most of the people don't update it, so it stays in a perpetual state of disconnect. And if you're a new developer, well, not a new developer, you're an experienced developer, new to crypto.
Any developer.
Yeah, any developer, you see this, it's going to be a big turnoff. And so what OpenRPC is really doing there is allowing you to be very clear about what the JSON RPC interface is, and then provide the tools to generate everything else. So, of course, we can't generate all of what is Web3.js because there's some like conversion stuff, there's stuff dealing with contracts, but at least the interface for making the calls like ETH_send draw transaction, those ones can all be generated, and the documentation can be included in the code so that when you're in Go or JavaScript and you're using Vim or Emacs or whatever editor you want, like it'll work with your editor, right? And same thing with the docs. So yeah, that's pretty much the big motivation for OpenRPC, is just like to stop doing the same thing over and over and over.
Save developer time, save all of our times for updating stuff everywhere. Like, we're a very small community. We shouldn't have to spend time maintaining a bunch of different projects.
And if I can plug another part of our tooling setup that I sort of mentioned earlier with Pristine, and the importance of automation now that we're talking about it. So like, developing OpenRPC has allowed us to define what most clients use for JSON RPC. We have that in one repo now, and if you're a client developer, you can choose to use that. And the idea is that using Pristine, it's all fully automatically released. So if you just change the JSON in that file, the next release, all the docs, all the clients, all that stuff is all automatically updated. And yeah.
Okay, now we'll talk about immutability. And it's an open question for anyone who wants to take it. How does immutability as a core value benefit developers who want to deploy to ETC as a platform for their dApps? If anyone wants to take it.
I'll take the first one, I guess. I think longevity is a big thing. Like, we're not going anywhere, right? Like, we have no plans for ETC 2.0, right? Like, this is it. And we're here for the long haul. And I think developers are starting to notice that like I said, we're not going away. And if they deploy something on ETC, then it's gonna be there in longer than the next 24 months, right?
I think for one, it helps. There's a bit of a social contract when you enter in to one of these things. It actually, the last panel, it kind of ties into some of the stuff they were talking about. If you're just, changing algorithms without telling anyone and like doing things suddenly, some people might have put a lot of work into the last thing and they have products coming out, and that's a bunch of waste of money for them, a waste of their time. The same thing is true for like users of dApps. When they enter into a dApp, they're entering into a contract that like you designed for the dApp, and they're also entering into the contract of the blockchain as a whole and the rules of that system. So changing those is, it kind of sucks for the users. And also, as these systems get bigger and bigger, it's like a coordination problem at a certain point. Like, it's small now, but you need to have a good anchor in order to grow a community, I think. And the less major changes you're doing, the more people can count on and start building on top of and have a solid foundation.
To add to that point, like, basically we don't want to break backward compatibility. And Wei, you spoke out against a certain EIP that would break backward compatibility. I believe under Robson testnet, Aragon, can you elaborate more on the backward compatibility in Ethereum?
So there's the new EIP that will be in Istanbul, the EIP 1884. The issue is quite simple. The idea around that EIP is quite good. So the thing is, some of our storage access and account access opcodes are underpriced, and we just so Martin did some analysis, and we ended up just want to raise the gas codes of those opcodes a little bit, but it turned out that it breaks stuff. So we found out the thing is just with the gas stipend. So some contracts will want to have the gas to implicitly use the gas stipend gas codes. And the thing is, previously they may have a fallback function that tries to log something and then call storage, and then in that case it will pass. But right now, because we raise the gas cost, that function will always fall. So we found out that there's deployed contracts that has real money in it is actually a lot that actually will be broken by this new EIP. So, yeah.
So I'm afraid we have to make this the last question. I don't know
no,
if
we're
you're
just
in the
getting
middle
started,
of answering that.
Yeah. No, you want to?
So if anybody else has got points on that, and then we need to move on, I'm afraid we're like horribly late. And it's my fault, I know.
Yeah. So immutability. I could fill 20 minutes now talking about immutability. I have really a lot of thoughts. So I just want to comment on backwards compatibility. But I believe every hard fork breaks backwards compatibility, and we need to be careful mixing up these terms here. I also believe specifically this EIP with the gas repricing is not directly, I mean, de facto breaks contracts, this is proven, but this is also like a philosophical discussion. Is this a good design decision to hard code gas costs in smart contracts? Is this maybe also just a weakness of the EVM that you cannot like query gas costs from within? I'm personally very skeptical that this is a bad thing. And I also believe, and this is my last comment on this, I believe we should not talk too much about immutability, not overusing this term too much in this community, because immutability is a key functionality of each and every blockchain. Bitcoin has it, Zcash has it, Monero has it, Ethereum Classic has it. You know, just because there's one blockchain that does not have it, we should not stress this too much. And I mean, yeah, that's
I actually disagree with the assessment that every hard fork breaks backward compatibility. I think the issue for us is that we just not design the EVM really well, so we have too many like observable behaviors that exposed to the EVM that can be used by the app. So there's a famous Horum's law, which states that like any observable behavior that you ended up exposed explicitly or implicitly will be dependent on by some developers. So in that case, our biggest offenders are basically the gas cost. And I believe there is a way to modify our EVM so that it is really hard to break backward compatibility, even we do gas cost change or we add any new features. I think there's a way to do it.
Yeah, on that note, thank you all for being here, for taking time to be part of the platform panel. Can we show a round of applause? Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone.